Dear students, now we are going to discuss about Planning Commission and NITI Ayog. The role and nature of the planning machinery would depend upon the nature of planning process. After India achieved independence, a formal model of planning was adopted, and accordingly the Planning Commission was established on 15 March 1950 with Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru as its chairman. Authority for creation of the Planning Commission was not derived from the Constitution of India or statute. It is an arm of the central government of India. Planning in India, as in most other settings, is essentially a backward and forward process, an exercise in successive approximation as well as successive coordination. Historically, the Planning Commission was the brainchild of Meghnad Saha in 1938, who along with Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose established the National Planning Committee with Jawaharlal Nehru as its chairman. It was again formed after independence in 1950 with the Prime Minister as an ex officio chairman. It mainly formed a centralized plan based on the principles of socialism. It was to formulate and review 5-year plans and monitor progress. But after liberalization in 1991, when the Indian economy was opened up, the methods of Planning Commission started failing. It was found gradually inappropriate to address the problems at the regional level because the different states had better knowledge of their local problems. Thus, two main goals of efficient allocation of resources and development of technology could not be possible with the Planning Commission. Planning Commission. As already mentioned, the Planning Commission was constituted on 15 March 1950 by a resolution of the Government of India. Being the brainchild of Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, who became the ex officio first chairman of the Planning Commission, the Commission was assigned a set of significant responsibilities for the economic reconstruction of the country. The following functions comprise the role of the Planning Commission: assessing and augmenting the resources. The Commission makes an assessment of the material, capital and human resources of the country, including the technical personnel, and explore the possibilities of augmenting those resources which are found to be deficient in relation to the nation's requirements. Number 2, plan formulation. It is entrusted with the responsibility of formulating plans for the most effective and balanced utilization of the country's resources. Third, defining implementation stages. The Planning Commission defines on a priority basis the stages in which the plan should be carried out and proposes the allocation of resources for the due completion of each stage, indicating requisite of plan execution. The Commission is expected to indicate factors that tend to retard economic development and determine the conditions which, in view of the current social and political situation, should be established for the successful execution of the plans. 5. Determining the execution machinery. The Commission is entrusted with the responsibility of determining the nature of machinery needed for securing the successful implementation of each stage of the plan from a holistic perspective. 6. Appraisal. An important function of the Planning Commission is to apprise from time to time the progress achieved in the execution of each stage of the plan, and then on the basis of its assessment recommend the required adjustments in policy and other measures. 7. Advise. The Planning Commission is expected to make appropriate interim or ancillary recommendations for a more effective formulation, execution and evaluation of the socio-economic plans, keeping in view the prevailing economic development milieu. Advice may also be rendered in response to specific references made toil by the central and the state governments. During decades of its existence, the Planning Commission has devoted itself to the performance of its defined functions, and yet the success of the planning effort in India has not been uniform and consistent during the long period of socio-economic planning. With the ushering in of a period of a liberalization and the globalization of the Indian economy, the role of the Planning Commission is changing, though this change is only subtle and to attempt has been made to formally redefine its functions. By convention, The Prime Minister of India is the chairman of the Planning Commission. He presides over the meetings of the whole Commission, keeps a watch on the implementation of the Commission's decisions, maintains liaison with the members of the National Development Council, the Union Council of Ministers, monitors the plans, undertakes their constant evaluation and broadly coordinates the working of the Commission. It needs to be stressed that much of the status and influence of the Planning Commission depends upon the attitude of the Prime Minister towards the Commission. Jawaharlal Nehru used to meet the Planning Commission as a matter of a routine. Indira Gandhi also used to call the meetings of the Commission occasionally. However, during Rajiv Gandhi's Prime Ministership, the Planning Commission had been devalued, and instead of the Prime Minister's office, informally took over the responsibility of the formulation of the 8th plan. Even the autonomy of the Planning Commission had become a myth. The main reason for the marginalization of the Planning Commission during that phase appears to be that the policy of liberalization started then had not emanated from the Commission, but had come from the Finance Ministry, and besides, technology missions for drinking water, literacy and telecommunications were set up outside the Planning Commission. Since the Prime Minister is only a part-time chairman of the Planning Commission and is unable to devote adequate time to its functioning and performance, the Deputy Chairman of the Commission is its de facto executive head. Several Deputy Chairmen of the Commission's existence have been whole-time. This enabled them to devote themselves completely to the Commission's working. The Deputy Chairman deals with the following subjects: administration of the Planning Commission, multi-level planning, plan coordination, state plans, perspective planning, hill area and desert development, financial resources, National Informatics Center, industry and minerals, tribal subplan, civil supplies and public distribution system, statistics and surveys, information and broadcasting and communications, monitoring of 20-point program, data bank, minimum needs program, all other subjects not allotted to other members. The Minister of State for Planning and Program Implementation in the Government of India, who is a member of the Planning Commission, deals with Commission's matters relating to the Parliament. He also acts as a link between the Ministry of Planning and Program Implementation and the Planning Commission. Since there are no well-defined regulations on the membership of Planning Commission, its structural pattern has been changing from time to time. The number of ministers and the whole-time expert members has never been fixed. This flexibility has perhaps facilitated the functioning of the Commission in tackling the emergent and the more urgent issues of economic change and social development. Attached bodies. Discussion on the organization of the Planning Commission would not be complete without reference to its attached bodies like Program Evaluation Organization and the National Informatics Center, etc. There is another institute under the Department of Planning of the Government of India, namely the Institute of Applied and Manpower Research, with which the Planning Commission has close relationship. National Development Council. The National Development Council is one of the key organizations of the planning system in India. It symbolizes the federal approach to planning and is the instrument for ensuring that the planning system adopts a truly national perspective. The NDC has experienced numerous ups and downs in its fortunes. Its status has been determined by the prevailing political climate and the support provided to it by the government in power at the center and the effectiveness of the pressures exerted by the state governments. Notwithstanding the vicissitudes that it has faced during the past 4 decades, its continuing presence in the apex policy structure has always been felt. Evolution of NDC. Way back in 1946, the Planning Advisory Board under the chairmanship of K.C. Niyogi had recommended the setting up of an advisory organization that would include representatives of the provinces, princely states and other interests. Although this idea was not implemented before independence, its rationale was well appreciated. The Planning Commission of the Government of India in the initial days of its inception had recognized the potential utility of such a coordinating body. In the draft first 5-year plan, it was stressed by the Planning Commission that in a vast country like India, where under the Constitution the states enjoy autonomy in the performance of their functions, there was need for a body like the National Development Council, which could facilitate periodical evaluation of planning and its various facets by the Prime Minister and the State Chief Ministers. Accordingly, the National Development Council was set up by a proposal of the Cabinet Secretariat of the Government of India in August 1952. The functions of the National Development Council as revised in 1967 following the adoption of the recommendations of the Administrative Reforms Commission are as follows. 1. To prescribe guidelines for the formulation of the national plan, to consider the national plan as formulated by the Planning Commission, to assess resources required for implementing the plan and to suggest ways and means for raising them, to consider important questions of social and economic policy affecting development, to review the working of the plan from time to time and recommend such measures as are necessary for achieving the aims and targets articulated in the national plan. Thus, the functional areas of NDC revolve around the broad policies for socio-economic development, formulation of the national plan, resource mobilization and periodical appraisal of the plan progress. Issues like food distribution, land reforms, state trading corporation have also figured in the discussions of the NDC. Structure. Since the inception, the National Development Council has comprised top-level representatives of the central as well as the state governments along with the members of the Planning Commission. The issue of reorganization of the NDC was taken up by the Administrative Reforms Commission in 1967. The Administrative Reforms Commission, in its report on the machinery for planning interim, had recommended that the NDC should be reconstituted as follows. 1. The Prime Minister. 2. The Deputy Prime Minister, if any, the Central Ministers of Finance, Food and Agriculture, Industrial Development and Company Affairs, Commerce, Railways, Transport and Shipping, Education, Labour Employment and Rehabilitation, Home Affairs, Irrigation and Power, the Chief Ministers of all states, the members of the Planning Commission. It was also recommended that the Prime Minister should continue as the chairman of the NDC, while the Secretary of Planning Commission should act as its secretary. The Government of India accepted the recommendations of the ARC in a slightly modified form. It was decided that the NDC headed by the PM should comprise all Union Cabinet Ministers, Chief Ministers of States, Chief Ministers or Chief Executives of the Union Territories and members of the Planning Commission. Accordingly, the NDC was reconstituted in October 1967 on these lines. It may be noted that the NDC generally does not pass any formal resolutions. The practice normally followed is that it maintains a detailed record of discussions held in its meetings and then draws a consensus on the basis of such discussions. All the decisions of the Council are unanimous, yet dissenting voices are generally difficult to ignore. The National Institution for Transforming India, also called Niti Ayog. Niti Ayog refers generally in Hindi, it says a policy commission, was formed via a resolution of the Union Cabinet on January 1st, 2015. Niti Ayog is the premier policy think tank of the Government of India, providing both directional and policy inputs. While designing strategic and long-term policies and programs for the Government of India, Niti Ayog also provides relevant technical advice to the centre and states. It was established in 2015 by the NDA government to replace the Planning Commission, which followed a top-down model. The Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman. The permanent members of the governing council are all the state chief ministers along with the chief ministers of Delhi and Puducherry and the lieutenant governors of other union territories and a vice chairman nominated by the Prime Minister. In addition, temporary members are selected from leading universities and research institutions. The Government of India, in keeping with the reform agenda, constituted the Niti Ayog to replace the Planning Commission instituted in 1950. This was done in order to better serve the needs and aspirations of the people of India. An important evolutionary change from the past, Niti Ayog acts as the quite essential platform of the Government of India to bring states to act together in national interest and thereby fosters cooperative federalism. At the core of the Niti Ayog's creation are two hubs, Team India Hub and the Knowledge and Innovation Hub. The Team India Hub leads the engagement of states with the central government, while the Knowledge and Innovation Hub builds the Niti's think tank capabilities. Niti Ayog is also developing itself as a state-of-the-art resource center with the necessary resources, knowledge and skills that will enable to act with speed, promote research and innovation, provide strategic policy vision for the government and deal with the contingent issues. Aims and functions. The key objectives to establish Niti Ayog were as follows: to work as an advisory body to give directional and strategic inputs to union government and also state governments on request. Put an end to the slow and tardy implementation of the policy by fostering inter-ministry, interstate and center-state coordination. To foster cooperative federalism on the principle of strong states make a strong nation. To design policy framework for weaker section of society that may not have benefited from economic progress. To create a knowledge, innovation and entrepreneurial support system via community of national and international experts, practitioners and partners. To serve as a platform for resolution of inter-sectoral and inter-departmental issues in order to accelerate the implementation of the development agenda. To monitor and evaluate the implementation of programs and focus on technology upgradation and capacity building. The structure of Niti Ayog. The Prime Minister as the chairperson, a governing council composed of the chief ministers of all the states and union territories with legislatures and lieutenant governors of the union territories except Delhi and Puducherry. Regional councils composed of chief ministers of states and lieutenant governors of the union territories in the region to address specific issues and contingencies impacting more than one state or a region. Full-time organizational framework composed of a vice chairperson, 5 full-time members, 2 part-time members from leading universities, research organizations and other relevant institutions in an ex officio capacity, 4 ex officio members of the Union Council of Ministers, a chief executive officer with the rank of the Secretary of the Government of India, who looks after the administration, and a secretariat. Experts and specialists in various fields with the Prime Minister as the chairperson, Vice Chairperson Rajiv Kumar, ex officio members Rajnath Singh, Arun Jaitley, Suresh Prabhu and Radha Mohan Singh, special invitees Nitin Gadkari, Prakash Javadekar and Tawar Chand Gehlot, full-time members Vivek Debroy as an economist, V.K. Saraswat, former DRDO chief, Ramesh Chand, agriculture expert and Dr. Vinod Paul, public health expert. Chief Executive Officer, that is CEO, is Amitabh Kant. Governing Council with all Chief Ministers of States, Delhi and Puducherry, and Lieutenant Governors of remaining Union Territories. Since the time of the creation of Niti Ayog, it has initiated a large number of reforms. In August 2016, it has come up with the Regulator Reform Bill and omnibus legislation that shall cater to the generic aspects of regulatory commission. Further, independent regulators have been set up across various sectors under various acts enacted by Parliament. Transparency is ensured by submission of annual reports and accounts to the government in prescribed form and laying them on the table of both the houses of the parliament. Recently, the Niti Ayog has contributed through the review of the 12th 5-year plan by stating the key policy interventions required in the fields like agriculture, manufacturing, employment generation and poverty elimination. It also made certain suggestions like use of more genetically modified seed varieties, creating an environment conducive for manufacturing in labor intensive sectors, simplification of labor laws, making tax laws free from ambiguities and help India improve on the ease of doing business index. Thus, it can be said the Planning Commission has emerged as an extra constitutional authority more powerful than the Finance Commission, even though it has not been mentioned in the Constitution of India. All the state governments have to depend on it for the allotment of financial resources. It has become the final approving authority for funds and has overstepped its role by arrogating to itself certain executive powers. It is not just a mere advisory body. Another reason is that Prime Minister is the chairman of the Planning Commission. There is also a criticism that the Commission has encroached upon the autonomy of the states by its acceptance, modification or rejection of state governments' development plans. Maybe the founding fathers of the Constitution might have not visualized or anticipated the emergence of such a powerful body in the years to come. As there is overlapping of functions between the Planning Commission and the Finance Commission, the Administrative Reform Commission suggested that there should be effective coordination between the two bodies. It said the Prime Minister should cease to be the chairman, though his association should be in another way. Allocation of work among members of the Commission should be based on their specialization and expertise. Whatever the recommendations, it may not be so easy to reduce the importance of the Planning Commission and the present socio-political economic scenario in the country. Hence, in this background, Niti Ayog was created to formulate national development strategy in a market economy integrated with the globalized world in the place of Planning Commission. As of now, the Niti Ayog faces a lot of challenges in the economic front. So, it will take some time for it to prove its efficiency. No doubt, it has started functioning to some extent, but it will not yield immediate results. However, some of the problems have been arising in its functioning. It does not act as an independent constitutional body which causes problems of accountability. This organization also facing the problems like Planning Commission. It's also a non-constitutional body which is not responsible to Parliament. It was criticized that Niti Ayog is against of the principles of federalism, and the government argues that it works on the model of cooperative federalism.